here from Drake Wayne Gaming. It's sending down Twitter, the Gaming Dragon. Today I'm coming at you with a new Let's Play series called Sparks, A Tale of Ink. Now, I believe this is a furry visual novel set in Chinese mythology. I believe it is Chinese mythology. I could be wrong. Yeah, wow, this is getting on me. I love it. Oh, man, just like the you can usually tell visual novel's quality from the quality of its main menu. And let me tell you, this, to me, oozes talent. And I cannot wait to jump right back in. Well, jump right in. So let's go ahead and jump in, y'all. Alarm chain, you are up. And let's go. Prologue. Thus ruled the sovereign. Final chapter. Oh, interesting. Thus he held the final divine remnant in his hands, the still beating heart of a dead god. As the king felt it merge with his own body, memories flooded back into his mind. Times of happiness with the man he loved more than anything in the world. Times of war and conflict that the two of them could overcome together. Times of loss as he held the lifeless body of his beloved in his hands on that fateful night. Times of change as the messenger from the stars began to talk to him, giving the king advice on where to go and what to prepare for. Times of disaster as the owner of the heart he now held was attacked by a fell creature. And lastly, the decisions he made, to save those who would still hang on to hope. The remnants of power still crackled through his veins after a hidden potential awoke to him at the border of despair and hope. He had lit the very first spark, the spark of hope. And now he would have to clear the dark clouds of calamity that were covering Cirque's skies with the might of a god and his newfound ability at his side. With all his hope for the future, he only wished that his lover was still looking on to him. As he ascended the world's throne as the sovereign, changing Cirque forever. This reads like a religious children's bedtime tale. Chapter 1. What we want, what we need. Ooh, pretty. As Zankin closed the book, he let out a soft groan and dropped the volume on the floor next to his bed, a small dust cloud rising up in response. 3, 4, 8, 10. 10 more pages that are just praise to the sovereign. Again. How dare anyone call this facts in their right mind? The lack of any information regarding agriculture, cuisine, battle techniques, anything. At best, this was a bad attempt at historic romance. No, wait, unless... Where are the sources? He proceeded to shoot up to his feet and immediately felt his back hurt. Regret for the sudden movement coursed through his being. How long had he been curled up in this horrible reading position now? He couldn't recall. While doing some stretches to relieve the pain, his gaze wandered through his dorm room. The wooden floor was holding up well, despite the dust that it had been collecting for who knows how long, in addition to being assaulted with books on the regular. The smell of burned wax and smoke lingered everywhere, especially in the fabrics of his bed, his clothes, and fur. It was hard to get rid of those when he couldn't open the window during the rainy seasons, lest he desired water damage on the books. The mere thought of it made his fur bristle. He gave a quick glance to his desk. He could check what he had written down during his previous reading sessions, but on second thought, Zankin sat down once again with a heavy sigh. In his head, he started to recount what the book that he just read stated, and realized that the focus was overtly on the relationship between the king and his second-in-command. How come I never noticed the many moments those two spent together in the lush fields, the noisy taverns, the cozy fireplaces? I should begin to inquire better on these works with the others in the future. Drained of energy, he opened the book to check when it was written. The foreword didn't even include a date of publishing. Horrible non-standard rescribes didn't even fix it? How hard could it be to plaster a date somewhere? He kept mumbling to himself as he found the afterword. Once he got past many more pages that told of the sovereign's many deeds. Deeds Zankin couldn't care less for. The student finally found the author's name, Salem Swiftquill. His title implied that this man had penned even more books, a thought that made Zankin shiver. A page after credited the rescribes that were responsible for the book. They probably put more effort into publishing copies of this piece of ash than the author did when writing it. The next few pages included more unnecessary credits that Zankin skipped over until he finally found a number. 1996. Really? That's atrocious, even for a delusional piece of fiction. What's this here, then? We attribute this work to the learnings of Ascension that he taught us. No, no, no! Full of spite, he tossed the book into the air. Of course. Written by some religious zealots. Of course this wouldn't lead him anywhere new. Only once again back to the start. Already at the brink of yelling out a curse he learned from his grandmother, Zankin wanted to catch the volume again so as not to suffer a concussion, until he realized that a small piece of paper was fluttering down next to it. So Ooh, I like that. That's pretty. Second nail. Water time. Okay. Immediately, he thought that it had been his fault. That he tore away a corner of the page and went through the scenarios in his head. What would happen if he returned the book in this state? A second cataclysm to tear sky and sea asunder, ash and molten stone raining down on his head. Perhaps he could ask Gale to fix it for him, but then he hadn't returned any of the favors that they did for him yet at all. Before more scenarios could go through his head, the books already landed back on his head and a torn piece of paper on his knees. To his relief, he noticed that the page didn't belong to the book at all. The material and handwriting were completely different from the rest of the dreadful tome. Strangely enough, it didn't line up with any writing he had seen before. The book he had just finished was from the Flatlands and had a curvy style, but what he saw here was very different. An elegant form with strict lines and no smudges at all. A truly professional calligrapher must have written it. Slightly awestruck, Zankin actually took a read of what was written on the paper, only to be disappointed by it being some nonsense with a single cryptic sentence next to it. Ascension truth, right at the end. His an M4, page 38. His enemy, maybe? He turned the piece around to be greeted by a cut-off sentence that reached to the end of the page. Mechanwaith Inade Edant E Dreg. The verdant tongue. He easily recognized it, as it was one of the many languages that were no longer spoken after the Sovereign's ascension. They were found in books written by the last king himself, though. Yet the strange note intrigued him far more. Ascension's truth. Right at the what? And who did this Enem belong to? Curiosity immediately crept up on him. Someone who must be who must be doing similar research to him, then hid a note in this book. No one else would look at it, other than those desperate for knowledge such as himself. Immediately, the euphoria of discovery turned into a sense of dread. Sure, he had found something of import, but what would he do with it? He had no clue as to how to decipher the code, nor could he read the text to assign it to any textbook. The potential truth of the world was at his fingertips, and he couldn't even solve the hint that he had received. Zankin felt just as pathetic as he had at home. He fell back and kept looking at the piece of paper, taking in the rain that was falling against the window. Truth of why the world was forced to exist like this. Perhaps the records were just that. Truth. But why, then, had there never been more of it? More to it? You will never find the truth if you aren't even looking for it. One of the many platitudes Calum came up with to motivate him in the face of roadblocks that he couldn't overcome himself. Calum. Perhaps... Zankin shot up and grabbed into the brown leather bag that was sitting next to his bed. He sifted through a book bound in brown leather, stopping at a very specific page. There he found the timetable of Calum's lectures for the month. He was in a lecture now, but Zankin could probably ask him about it afterwards. Zankin himself might be at a loss, but his professor had always been encouraged to ask for help. So what kept him from it? He grabbed his bag and slung it over his shoulder, then proceeded to look at his own calendar. These were located in every dorm room. While the pages were slightly yellowed with age, it was in good condition still. No need to change what isn't broken. He made sure that he was on the right day, and in shock realized that the month of downpour was ending in just 2 days. It was easy to lose track of time, but the calendars were installed in such a way that a ray of light would be focused through the windows onto the current day. People worked hard on that technique for years. Whoever set them up must live a life of luxury now. He discarded the thought and took in a sharp breath, leading him to cough immediately from the dust he had swirled up. With confidence in his mind, Zankin snapped the thumb and middle finger on his right hand, making the fire of his fireplace and candle disappear. A familiar warmth filled Zankin's chest for a moment, and after taking a deep breath, he opened the door and left his room. Second note. Water time. God, that is good water. Oh my god. Especially after a hard day at work. First lecture hall was easily located. Calum was, luckily, always assigned to the same one. At some point he said that it was simply a location he preferred, even though all the lecture halls were supposed to look the same. He opened the door to the hall with the horrible antler knob and started looking for a vacant seat. Between the mixed figures of listeners, he could also spot some people from his own inauguration. After all, there was no rigid timetable to adhere to. He let himself fall into a chair next to a pair of students who were squinting their eyes, looking at the illegible writing that the raccoon plastered onto the board and back at their own books. Zankin chuckled with confidence and inched closer to the two of them. His experience with the rather eccentric history professor had been similar. Ooh, excuse me. Zankin reached for one of his own notebooks with precision and put it down so the other two, who started focusing on him instead of the lecturer, could take a peek into the notes. He's explaining sodites again, isn't he? It wasn't even a question. It is said that the world had fallen into patterns at the behest of the sovereign, but people are doing so as well. They're just harder to spot. Every now and then, Calum had to talk about how he had revolutionized the water systems of the bigger cities, thanks to his discovery of notes on the so-called sodites. One of them, a panther dressed in light robe, stared back at him. Me and my mate here can't follow a single word he's saying. We both know our ins and outs of basic sparks and such, but what in the name of the depths is he talking about? What exactly do you mean? He likes to talk. A lot when the day is long. Steel construct systems lie down a redundant feedback loop of ink-based circuits that either lead to a positive feedback loop or, on exposure of a muted negative feedback with a suppressed loop of transparent absorbent casing is used. Jesus. What in the name of the sea does he mean? He means... well... he's just taking words he read and uses them to appear smarter. What now? The words. He doesn't know what they mean either. He just wants to appear smart. He just... what? What kind of history professor just makes things up? And believe it or not, the best one out there. He has helmed every single expedition to Old World ruins so far, organizing and executing them. Is that why he's wearing those garish Old World clothes? Yes, he apparently found the patterns for them on his very first foray and has been wearing them ever since. People have never seen him without the coat. So he just wants to make things seem more interesting then. Doesn't help me understand anything he said about these damn stones, though. I only know they remember sparks or something. Exactly, you can build complex systems around them. Like what? I certainly could explain them, but I feel like what would be much more favorable is a practical demonstration. You've been listening in, haven't you? The question wasn't directed at the other student, but rather somewhere else as Zankin raised his voice. Oh, hello there. The broad-shouldered professor downstairs only nodded, looking up to the two who had also begun drawing the gaze of the other listeners. Zankin stood up and reached out as Calum threw a small black gemstone at him. Smooth through the touch, he almost dropped it, but managed to grasp it properly. The surface was non-reflective, and he could feel something wrapped around the stone, akin to a thread. With turning it a little, he could see that a thread connected down to the end of the lecture hall, where Calum was holding a different sodite. What's that now? Your cue, I'd say. Do you have any ink? What kind of question is that? Of course I do. The panther grasped a ring, similar to the one that Zankin wore, and took it off. It was made from transparent glass-like material and filled almost to the brim with a white substance. Are you ready down there? Second, y'all. One more time. Okay. I'm always ready. Can we start? Sure can. Stone in hand, Calum went to the window with it. He opened a small compartment with trained expertise, then held it outside in the rain. Well, what now? Now you put some ink on the stone. Easy as that. Said and done, the panther pulled on a small latch on the ring's side, letting a droplet of ink escape from its confines. For a moment, things went well, until the water began pouring out of every inch of the stone. In disgust, Zankin dropped the sodite and accidentally rammed his hand to the panther's side, who still had the compartment of his ring opened. The sudden movement made more droplets of the substance spray around. They landed on Zankin's hand and the panther's cheek. Pain spread throughout his body immediately, and he screamed out loud. Oh, flames! What did you do? I didn't do anything! You hit me! The panther was holding his cheek where the ink landed, likely feeling the same pain as Zankin. How do I make it stop hurting? Just wait a bit. It's been... He inhaled sharply. Just a droplet. The sensation should be gone in a moment. What happened? Didn't you know that you're not supposed to touch ink? It's the first thing young sparkers learn. Water had begun to pool on the floor from the sodite he dropped before. Coordinating his legs was hard as he still felt the sharp pain course through his hand. All the while, Calum's booming laugh got louder by the moment. The pain had finally started to fade as Calum picked up the stone that had stopped emitting water and threw it out the window compartment he opened earlier. He cast it out with precision, despite the angle being extremely sharp. Then he placed his own sodite down on the wet floor and poured a drop of ink from a small glass onto it as well. In the blink of an eye, the water was gone. Thank you, Professor. No problem, boy. I like helping out those that bite off more than they can chew, and let me tell you, there's Zankin here always picks the biggest meals from the pile. His laugh filled the hall once again. He then checked on the two students to make sure they were fine. Other than his wet paws, Zankin felt fine and grumbled a thank you in his direction. Alright, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and pause it right there. Thank y'all so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and check out our Patreon if you can. It always helps. Anyway, I love you all. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye!